Hi, and welcome to another video note for Java Software Solutions. My name is John Lewis, and in this note we will be exploring the basic program elements that you'll see in any Java program. For this example, we'll start with a clean slate, an empty file. Let me pull up my editor here. And we'll discuss the program elements as we add them. Usually when you're starting a new program, you'll begin with a template perhaps that has the basic structure of a program, or perhaps you'll just reuse an old program that you've created just to save time, to save editing effort. And we'll do that in future screencasts, but for this one we'll start with nothing. I'm using the JEdit editor in this project. You can use various editors or development environments to create and modify your Java programs. In another screencast, several options along those lines are discussed in some detail. For this one, I'm using JEdit and the command line tools that are available to compile and execute a program. So in this empty file, first we'll add the outline for the class definition. In this case, public class, and I'm calling it Dewey quote because the purpose of this is to print out a quotation from John Dewey. And I follow that with the curly braces that delimit, that surround the contents of the class. Almost everything in a Java program is part of a class. And the class is made up of everything that we put in between these brackets. A class may be made up of data declarations, possibly several methods. In this case, our class will contain a single method called main. So let's begin to put that in. Public static void main paren string bracket bracket args. Looks a little strange, but bear with me. You'll get used to this. Note that I'm indenting the main method within the class. You don't have to as far as the compiler is concerned, but certainly you want to in terms that it makes the code more readable, and you want to follow a consistent indentation style. Like the class, a method uses the curly braces to show what's inside the method as well. Before we add anything to the main method, let's just take a look at what we have already. We have one class and one method defined within that class. Now, any word we use in a program is called an identifier. So we have identifiers like public and class and Dewey quote. Here's public again, static void main, string, args. All of those are identifiers. Some, however, are special in that they are reserved words of the language. Words that are part of the Java language itself with specific meaning. So words like public and class and static and void, these are reserved words of the Java language, and you can't use them for anything other than how they're defined to be used. Now, I've set up my JEdit editor to show reserved words in blue, but you're not seeing that right now because JEdit doesn't realize that this is a Java program. But when I go to save this, I'll save it as Dewey quote.java. The moment I save this program with a .java extension, JEdit realizes that this is a Java file and therefore highlights, syntax highlighting, colors the reserved words, in this case in blue the way I've set it up. That's just an extra benefit to many editors to just help you realize what pieces are what. So those are the reserved words highlighted in blue in this particular example. Other words are words that a programmer makes up. So for instance, my class name here, Dewey quote, is a name I just made up. I could have called this anything I wanted to, basically. When we are picking names for things, though, we want to follow standard conventions. So for instance, a class name should begin with an uppercase letter, as in Dewey quote, the capital D in Dewey quote. Method names, however, like main, start with a lowercase letter, and you want to follow these kinds of conventions, again, just to make your programs readable for other programmers. The method name main is not a reserved word of the language. I could name this method anything I want. But a method called main, declared exactly this way, is special in that it's where a Java program begins. And we'll see how that works out in a minute when we execute it. For now, we're going to basically ignore what the effect some of these other identifiers have. What it means for this class to be public, what it means for main to be public and static. We're not going to worry about that right now, and we'll come back to it in due course. So now we have the basic structure of the program, but the main method doesn't do anything yet. So let's add some statements. In this case, we will call another method within main. I'm going to call system.out.println and send it the string, a problem well stated is half solved. That's the quote from John Dewey. In fact, I think I'll call this same method twice. This time I'll indicate that it is who the author is, John Dewey, of the quote. So now we have a complete program in that we have a main method that does something. In particular, it calls the println method twice to print a couple of strings to the screen. And basically what we're doing is asking the system.out object to execute its println method, and the role of that method is to take a string that we hand it and print that out to the screen. So we now have a complete program that actually does something, and we could now compile and execute it. But before we do that, let's add some comments to this program. A comment is for the human reader only. It doesn't have any effect on the program one way or another. And there are three types of comments in Java. I'm using the one that begins with a slash, the double slash rather. Everything from the double slash to the end of the line is part of the comment. So I'm going to put, first of all, the name of the file I'm working in. I'm also going to indicate the author. I'll usually put a purpose for each class and each method. So I'm going to just simply say that this class, the Dewey Quote class, is used to review the basic program elements of a Java program. I'm also going to put some lines of asterisks in just to really accentuate and highlight. I'll copy it and in fact put it above, making that a header block of documentation and really setting it off from the rest of the program. Note that it's also colored in green. Again, from a syntax coloring point of view, JEdit is set up to put the comments in green. So now I have a header block of documentation for my class indicating what it's doing. I'm also going to put a block of documentation on the method. Usually you put it on every method. Once again, I'm going to add just delimiters to really make the header blocks stand out. In this case, I will indicate that the main method prints a quote from John Dewey. All right, and of course these comments are critically important as your programs get very large, and you need to communicate to anybody reading this code exactly what's going on in the program. All right. Now let's get this program compiled. So I'm going to save it again. Wrong one. And now I'm able to compile it. This is just an editor. JEdit is just an editor, so I need to bring up a command line tool to actually edit this, or rather compile and execute this program. So if I do a directory listing in this directory that we saved this in, I see my deweyquote.java file there. And I can now submit it to the Java compiler, javac, deweyquote.java. And at this point, I could see errors occur if I've done something wrong in terms of the syntax of the language. The fact that I just got my prompt back indicates that there are no errors in this particular program, at least none that the compiler detected. So I'm now ready to execute it. Let's do another directory listing so that we see that it took our deweyquote.java source code program, our Java code, and it turned it into deweyquote.class, the bytecode version of the deweyquote class that is now able to be executed. To execute it, I submit it to the Java interpreter, which is simply called Java. I give it the name deweyquote, this time without the .class extension. And when I submit it, it actually executes the program, prints out the two strings that I requested it to print out, and there we have it. The program is running. So the whole purpose of this effort was just to, even in a very small program, begin to see the various elements that make up a program. We have classes, we have methods within those classes, we have statements within those methods. They are made up of identifiers and reserved words. We have comments to help human readability, etc. These are all the small building blocks that make up any program that we'll see in Java, and we will extend this in many directions from here. So those are the basics.